An honor guard accompanying a fallen soldier's remains faced an unexpected challenge at airport security. What unfolded afterward brought an entire airport to a respectful standstill. Initially, passengers barely registered his presence as he disembarked from Flight 216, arriving from Tucson, into the bustling Hartsfield-Jackson terminal, moving like an unassuming figure seeking no recognition. His attire was immaculate: dark uniform jacket, pristine white gloves, proper military cap, positioned low, maintaining perfect posture. Dorian Ellison had not come for leisure or personal business. His mission was to accompany home the remains of a fallen comrade, a soldier unable to return under his own power. The flag-draped casket descended the ramp with careful handling, the stars and stripes positioned properly without blemish or damage, exactly as protocol demanded. Dorian moved beside it as though the surrounding chaos ceased to exist. This dedication stemmed from his training and sacred commitment to safeguard the dignity of those who made the ultimate sacrifice, whether witnessed or not, particularly when unobserved. Though he had performed this duty previously, the emotional weight never diminished. Each nameplate represented a unique individual. Each family member waiting at home carried their own burden of loss. This particular mission involved Staff Sergeant Lennox Rayford, age 29, survived by 2 children in Fresno who died protecting others when an explosion intended for someone else claimed his life. While Dorian had never met him personally, he knew of Rayford's character, the type of leader who ensured others ate before himself, provided cover for his unit, and volunteered for overnight duties when unnecessary. Now this hero was returning to his final resting place. Dorian's movement was methodical, neither ostentatious nor rigid, simply consistent, as if his footwear was permanently anchored to the ground. Gradually, onlookers began to take notice, not many initially, but sufficient to create awareness. A couple near a window set down their beverages. A young person with partially removed headphones blinked and leaned closer. The quiet wasn't overwhelming, but possessed depth. A Transportation Security Administration officer nearby whispered to a coworker, glancing toward the casket, "That's an honor guard, correct? One of those Arlington sentries." The colleague simply acknowledged with a nod, observing intently. However, not everyone comprehended what they were witnessing. As Dorian reached the jetway's end, the atmosphere shifted, not within him, but surrounding him. A junior security official, holding a clipboard, appeared to be in her 20s and hurried over from an adjacent corridor. "Pardon me, sir," she called out. Dorian maintained his pace. She quickened her steps to match his. "Sir, I require verification of your authorized access." He remained focused, never diverting his gaze from the casket. "Ma'am, I am presently conducting the escort of a deceased serviceman to ground transportation. I must not be impeded." His response contained no hostility or defiance, merely stating facts. Yet she remained unconvinced. "You comprehend that, however, this zone has restricted access. I received no notification regarding any ceremonial procession today. Without proper clearance, I must contact my superiors." Now observers were genuinely paying attention. Dorian halted, not by choice, but by necessity. His hold on the casket platform's handle tightened slightly. The tension between them was almost audible. His voice remained quiet, yet firm. "Ma'am, please step aside." The officer wavered. She looked at the casket, then back at him. "I'm simply adhering to established procedures. If I permit you to proceed without authorization, something occurs." Behind her, an older gentleman wearing a Delta maintenance uniform began approaching slowly, hands partially raised as if not wanting to alarm anyone. He appeared experienced with similar situations. "Perhaps we should summon a supervisor," he suggested gently, but she declined. "I am the supervisor for this concourse today," she responded more defensively. People had stopped moving. No phones were visible, just observers. Throughout this entire exchange, Dorian never wavered, not once, not even when the officer moved closer and extended her hand toward the casket as if to examine it. That's when the intervention occurred. From across the concourse, a voice called out, not loudly, but with clear urgency, "Do not touch that flag!" Before the officer could react, the woman behind that voice was already approaching them with eyes that held untold stories. Her identification read, Tasha Pennington, but you didn't need to see it to recognize she was someone who didn't waste words. Late 40s, wearing a pressed navy blouse and practical shoes, worn from years of standing, she wasn't running, but moved with clear purpose. Tasha had been employed at this airport for 23 years. She had witnessed celebrities have meltdowns over flight delays and seen young servicemen weep at gates before deployment. But this situation was different. As she approached, she didn't acknowledge the officer, keeping her attention fixed on the casket and flag. "Move back," she stated calmly but firmly. "You do not touch that." The officer straightened. "Ma'am, I was simply following proto—" "I said move back," Tasha repeated. "You may write me up if you choose, but that man will not be stopped, and you certainly don't place hands on that flag." Dorian hadn't moved, still standing and holding the platform, but his eyes briefly shifted toward her, just long enough to notice the small gold crosspin beneath her badge. Tasha turned toward him, and for the first time since leaving the aircraft, Dorian's expression softened slightly. "My father completed 3 tours in Vietnam," she said quietly. "He used to share stories about the honor guard, said they were the reason some of his fellow soldiers returned home with dignity." Dorian gave the slightest acknowledgement, nothing more. "I noticed your badge number when you passed through the terminal," she added. "I didn't speak then, but when I saw her attempting to stop you—" Tasha paused and looked at the younger officer, who now appeared uncertain about everything. "I couldn't allow that to happen." The crowd had expanded to perhaps 15 or 20 people. Nobody moved or spoke, just watched. A teenage boy near the back whispered, "Is he a soldier?" An older gentleman beside him, possibly in his 60s, answered without looking away, "Not just a soldier. That's an honor guard from Arlington." The words carried significance. The atmosphere changed. The junior officer swallowed hard. I didn't realize. I thought this was just standard cargo procedures." Tasha addressed her, firm but not unkind. "That's not cargo. That's someone's child, someone's father, perhaps, and that man is escorting him home." For the first time, the officer seemed to truly observe the casket. Her voice dropped to a whisper, "I apologize." Dorian didn't respond. He didn't need to. Then quietly, he took one small step forward and resumed his journey. Nobody interfered. Tasha fell into step beside him, not out of obligation, but because it felt appropriate. "I'll accompany you to the transfer vehicle," she said, "just in case someone else forgets what that uniform represents." They spoke little as they proceeded through the corridor. Occasionally, someone alongside would pause, remove their hat, or lower their head. Not everyone, but enough. A security guard near a vending machine stood and saluted. Dorian didn't acknowledge these gestures. That wasn't his responsibility. His eyes remained forward, focused and locked, but he felt it. The respect, the silence, the significance. It didn't matter if they knew the soldier's identity, unit, or where the explosive device detonated. What mattered was that he mattered. Tasha stopped at the sliding glass doors leading to the loading area. The transfer vehicle waited with rear doors open, lined with white padding and black restraints. Dorian turned to her. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said, "but it was the right thing." He gave the smallest tilt of his chin, not quite a nod. She took a breath. "Do you ever grow weary of performing this duty?" Dorian paused. "No," he said. "Why not?" He looked down at the flag, then back at her. "Because every time I do it means someone else doesn't have to." But as he prepared to lift the casket onto the transport bed, someone new approached. Someone who had remained silent but had been observing the entire time. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, mid-50s, wearing a blazer over jeans with aviator sunglasses, still on as if he hadn't adjusted to indoor lighting. His identification badge swayed slightly as he moved. Federal Security Director was printed beneath his name. Bryce Hanford. He didn't arrive aggressively, but with the calm authority of someone accustomed to resolving problems. However, he wasn't seeking problems now. He was trying to understand what had nearly occurred. "Who interrupted this procession?" he asked, not shouting, but loud enough for everyone within earshot to freeze. The young officer raised her hand slightly. "It was me, sir." He turned to her. "What's your name?" "Officer Alyssa Gentry," she replied, attempting to keep her voice steady. "Gentry, explain what protocol you were following that required physically inspecting a military escort with a flag-draped casket." She hesitated. "I didn't recognize the clearance, sir. I didn't realize who he was. I thought—" "You thought incorrectly," he said, still composed but now sharp. "We conduct briefings on escort protocol every 3 months. You should have known, and if you didn't know, you should have inquired." Tasha stepped forward before Gentry could respond. "She didn't mean harm," she said. "She just didn't know better." Hanford glanced at Tasha. He seemed to know her, probably had crossed paths multiple times in this airport. "I understand that, but that doesn't excuse disrespect, intentional or not. You don't touch the flag, period. You don't delay the honor guard. You don't question a man performing duties you'll never have to." Gentry nodded quietly. "I understand, sir." Hanford turned to Dorian. "I owe you an apology on behalf of the airport and TSA. This shouldn't have occurred." Dorian's voice was calm but direct. "It's not about me. It's about who I'm escorting." Hanford gave a respectful nod. "Understood." They stood in silence for several seconds, the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. Tasha finally broke it. "Are we good now?" Hanford sighed, then glanced at the transfer van. "We're good." Dorian returned to the casket, slid his gloved hands beneath the rails, and with the same care he had started with, gently lifted it onto the transport platform. No sudden movements, no sound except the click of the securing straps. A man waiting by the driver's side, a Vietnam-era veteran judging by the patches on his windbreaker, snapped to attention and saluted. Nobody asked him to. He simply did. A moment passed, and Tasha looked toward Dorian one final time. "I've been employed here for more than 2 decades, she said. "I've seen many people pass through, but I've never seen anyone carry themselves the way you do." Dorian didn't smile, but something softened in his posture. "It's not for show," he said. "It's for the fallen." She nodded, and that was it. He climbed into the passenger seat of the van, not taking his eyes off the casket even as the doors closed. No music, no fanfare, just the sound of the van departing through the back gate, disappearing into the humid afternoon. But the story didn't end there, because one man in that crowd had recorded what happened. Not for social media engagement or popularity, but because he wanted to remember what respect looked like. The video wasn't flashy. It didn't have music or filters, just a single unsteady shot from a cell phone recorded by Jerome Thacker, a truck driver from Shreveport who had been sitting near Gate C-42 with a breakfast burrito when the scene began to unfold. He hadn't planned on filming anything. In fact, he disliked that people always had their phones out. But something about the way Dorian walked, silent, strong, focused, made him press record. Jerome posted the 90-second clip to his Facebook that night with a simple message. Honor guard stopped by airport security while escorting fallen soldier. Man didn't even flinch, carried that casket like he was walking on sacred ground. He went to sleep with perhaps 7 likes. By morning, it had over 2 million views. People in the comments weren't just reacting, they were sharing stories. Stories about fathers who never returned home, about brothers who did but were never the same, about cousins who stood in the rain for hours just to salute someone they barely knew. One comment near the top read, "My brother served in the 3rd Infantry. He said the honor guards are the reason people still believe in honor." Another, "That woman in the Navy shirt, that's Tasha. She's been at the Delta desk in Atlanta forever. She helped me find my mother's bag when it got lost. Of course she stepped in." And one more, "That guard didn't flinch, not once. God bless him." Tasha hadn't seen the video yet. She was too busy working another double shift and helping reroute flights after a sudden thunderstorm delayed the morning departures. But someone showed it to her in the break room that afternoon. She watched it without blinking. She watched herself walk into frame and say, "Don't touch that flag." She watched Dorian stand tall without ever looking around for help. And then she heard a voice in the background, barely audible over the low crowd chatter. It was a woman's voice. "Do you even know who he is?" No one could determine exactly who said it, but it echoed through the video like a stone tossed in still water. Later that evening, Dorian sat on the edge of a motel bed in Macon, Georgia. Clean room, 2 twin beds, remote on the dresser. He'd delivered the casket to the local funeral home a few hours earlier. Tomorrow he'd attend the memorial service, standing in the back like he always did. He didn't check his phone until after his boots were off. 1 missed call from Captain Riley, 3 texts from guys on base, and then a link. He clicked it. There he was on screen. That walk, that moment, that voice, Tasha's. He watched it in silence, then watched it again. He didn't care about going viral. He didn't want attention. That wasn't why he wore the gloves or the hat or walked with measured steps. He did it because Staff Sergeant Rayford had done his part, and now it was Dorian's turn to carry him home. Still, something about that clip stayed with him. Not because people noticed him, but because they noticed the act, the respect, the fact that there are things you don't question, things you don't interrupt. He turned off his phone and stared at the blank wall across from him. This was never supposed to be about going viral, but maybe, just maybe, it was good that people saw it. But the video hadn't just reached people at home. It had made its way to someone else. Someone who had been quietly grieving hundreds of miles away. In a modest, sun-worn house outside Fresno, Janelle Rayford sat on the edge of her living room couch with her hands in her lap and her phone resting screen up beside her. It had buzzed 7 times in the last half hour. Family, friends, old neighbors, they were all sending her the same link. At first, she didn't want to open it. She'd spent the last week drowning in grief, funeral arrangements, military paperwork, the impossible job of explaining to 2 little boys that their father wouldn't be coming home. But curiosity got the better of her. When she finally pressed play, her eyes locked onto the screen. The camera shook, but she could still make him out. The man in uniform, the way he walked beside the casket, the tension, the pause. The woman stepping in to stop it all. She saw the argument, then the silence, then the walk. She cried, but not like she had in the days before. This wasn't the raw, messy kind of crying that broke out when the knock came at the door, or when she first saw Lennox's uniform folded in a box. No, this was quieter, slower. She watched Dorian like she'd known him for years. She didn't know his name yet, but the way he moved, the way he protected her husband's memory, even without knowing his story, it hit different. Her oldest son, Dorian, came into the room mid-video, dragging his backpack behind him. "Mom, what's that?" She wiped her eyes quickly. "It's a video someone filmed of the man bringing Daddy home." Dorian walked over and stood beside her, his brows pulled together the way his father's used to. "Is that him?" "No," she said, pointing to the man in uniform. "That's someone else. That's the guard." Dorian squinted. "He looks serious." "He's supposed to," she said. "That's part of his job." "Is he sad?" "I think so," she said softly, "but he's not allowed to show it." Dorian leaned on her shoulder, and together they watched the rest of the clip. Janelle whispered almost to herself, "He made sure your daddy came home the right way." Dorian didn't say anything, but when the video ended, he looked up at her. "Can I meet him someday?" She didn't answer right away. Back at the airport, Tasha sat on the bench outside the staff entrance with a half-eaten granola bar in one hand and her phone in the other. She was watching the video again, but her mind wasn't on the screen. It was somewhere else, 25 years back, maybe more. She remembered her dad, Royce Pennington, standing in the living room in his old army tee, pointing at the TV during a Memorial Day ceremony. "You see those boys in the white gloves?" he asked her. She was only 7 then. "Yeah." "They don't blink, they don't break. They guard the tomb 24 hours a day, rain or shine." "Why?" "Because some folks gave everything, and it's our job to remember." She didn't get it at the time, but now she did. Her dad had passed in 2011. Stroke, quiet, peaceful. But she always remembered the way he spoke about honor, like it was something physical, something you could hold in your hand or pass down like a family recipe. That day with Dorian wasn't about being a hero or going viral. It was about stepping in when someone forgets what respect looks like. She tucked her phone away and stood up to head back inside. As she opened the door, a passing pilot she didn't recognize gave her a quiet nod and said, "Saw the video, you did right." She didn't reply, just gave a small smile and kept walking. But the story wasn't finished. Not yet. Because someone had a message for Dorian Ellison, and they weren't going to rest until he heard it. 2 days later, Dorian returned to the same airport. Same boots, same uniform, same silence. This time he wasn't escorting a body. He was scheduled to fly back to D.C., back to the 3rd Infantry Base, back to the structure and silence of Arlington. But something about this trip felt different. The weight was still there, just in a different shape. As he passed through the concourse, a few people stopped what they were doing. One woman near the newsstand blinked, leaned toward her friend, and whispered, "That's him. That's the one from the video." Dorian kept walking. He wasn't interested in attention. He wasn't trying to become a symbol. He just wanted to get back to the post, back to the tomb, back to where silence means something sacred. But when he reached gate D17, something unexpected happened. A Delta employee walked briskly toward him. She looked flustered, but in a hopeful way, like she was holding back emotion just behind her professionalism. "Are you Dorian Ellison?" He hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Someone left this for you, said you'd be coming through." He took it with a gloved hand, unfolded it slowly. It was a handwritten note. Simple. No flourish. "I don't know your story, but you helped carry mine. My husband was Staff Sergeant Lennox Rayford. I saw what you did. My sons saw it too. Thank you for treating him like he still mattered. You didn't speak, but we heard you. Janelle Rayford. He didn't move for a long time. Didn't blink. Didn't shift. Just stood there with a note in his hand. Then he folded it gently and slid it into his jacket pocket. Not like it was a letter, like it was something that needed to be carried. The gate agent, still nearby, looked unsure if she should say something else. Dorian finally spoke. Did she leave a return address? No, sir. He nodded. That's okay. She hesitated. There's actually one more thing. I know this is out of the ordinary, but some of the staff and passengers wanted to do something. Dorian tilted his head. What kind of something? She looked over her shoulder, then stepped aside. What Dorian saw next made him pause for the first time in days. Near the main boarding lane, about 20 people were standing in a line. Airport workers, random passengers, a janitor still holding a mop handle. No signs, no speeches, just standing shoulder to shoulder, hats off, hands over hearts, and then silence. Someone gave a signal. Every one of them turned slightly in his direction and just stood. No applause, no music, just stillness. And it spread down the hall. People who hadn't even seen the video or known the story began to slow their pace. Some stopped walking, some took off hats. Others placed hands on hearts, simply because the moment asked for it. A child tugged at his mom's sleeve. Why is everyone stopping? She bent down and whispered, because that man did something for someone who couldn't do it for themselves. The whole terminal didn't clap. They didn't chant his name. They just stood, and Dorian, for the first time in a long while, felt it. Not praise, not recognition, but understanding. But as Dorian finally boarded his flight and settled into his seat, a voice came over the intercom, and it wasn't the usual welcome aboard. The plane hadn't even pushed back from the gate when the overhead speakers crackled to life. Most passengers were still settling in, stowing bags, adjusting armrests, scanning the exits without really seeing them. Then came a voice, not from the cockpit, from the front of the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, the flight attendant began, her voice a little shaky but steady enough to be heard. Before we depart, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge someone special on board. Dorian looked up, frowning slightly, not curious, just alert. The attendant continued. Today we are honored to have with us a U.S. Army Honor Guard, Sergeant Dorian Ellison, who recently completed the sacred duty of escorting one of our nation's fallen soldiers home. A ripple moved through the cabin. Some heads turned. A few passengers already knew who he was. Others were putting it together for the first time. The attendant paused, then added, He didn't ask for this recognition, but sometimes gratitude doesn't need permission. Dorian sat still. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't smile. He wasn't built for that kind of spotlight, but something in his chest felt different now. Like something had shifted, and then from the back of the plane came the sound of a single person clapping, just one, then another and another, until it wasn't a round of applause. It was a rhythm, slow, measured, like a salute in sound. Dorian looked out the window. He didn't want the focus, but in that moment he understood. It wasn't about him. It was about Lennox Rayford. It was about every soldier who never got to come home. It was about the people watching, realizing maybe for the first time that some acts of service happen without cameras, without ceremony, without even thanks. And yet, they happen anyway. He bowed his head. Not low. Just enough. The applause faded. The cabin grew quiet. And the plane took off. Back in Fresno, Janelle stood on the porch with her two sons. The wind was picking up. Somewhere out past the street, a neighbor's flag flapped against its pole. Brillin looked up at her. Mom, is that man going to do it again? Escort another soldier? She nodded. He will. Do they always walk alone like that? Sometimes, she said, but not really, not when people are watching. The boy seemed to think about that. Is it okay that we watched? Janelle smiled. It's more than okay. It's why he walked like that in the first place. At Arlington, 2 weeks later, Dorian stood once more at the tomb of the unknown soldier. It was early. The sun wasn't even fully out. Mist hung over the stone. The world was quiet again. His shift began at the top of the hour, and with no audience, no video, no applause, he took 21 steps, paused, turned, took 21 more. Because some things aren't about being seen, they're about being right. They're about honor, they're about remembering. This wasn't about one airport or one soldier or one moment. This was about knowing when to step in. It was about seeing the value of a person before you understand their role. It was about respecting what we don't always recognize. Whether you wear a uniform or not, whether you speak up or just stand still, you have the power to show honor. You have the power to interrupt disrespect gently but firmly, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand still and stand up. If this story moved you, share it, not for views, not for clicks, but so someone else sees what respect looks like, so someone remembers, so we don't forget the ones who carried the weight quietly and the ones who stood beside them, even when they didn't have to.